We say at the ADECO group, we say we need a new social contract. So it's about redefining the expectations or realizing the new expectations and the new rights or responsibilities that everyone, the employers, the employee, and the institutions or the public, in broader terms, are having.
Well, welcome back everyone to part 2 of this episode of the World of Work podcast of the WOW, where I was joined by Mureille Antille. As a reminder, she's the head of government and industry affairs at LHH, so she really brings in this wonderful perspective from literally a 360-degree view of what is happening out there when it comes to this burning topic of the new normal, which is transitions, careers, regulations. How ready are we to embrace a future made of greater mobility and greater need of flexibility? So we ended part 1 talking about the great resignation, or rather, I prefer to call it the great realization that current paradigms, current ways of thinking, current regulations will no longer be serving us for future worlds of work. So we start from there. And as a reminder, this was also a live event. So with everything that comes with live events, including technical glitches, and so apologies for that. But more importantly, including the comment, the observation of one of the participants when it comes to another important topic related to what's happening in the world of work nowadays, which is related to age. And it's related to a little bit of that human bias that when you hit the 50 and above, well, the market kind of closes up on you. But before getting there, we ask Murielle, what is she seeing happening out there when it comes to the government institutions or other important institutions like the ILO and similar? What is happening on that front?
Yeah, it's a very broad question, and as you say, it's not just topic-wise a broad question, but it's also from a cultural perspective. Governments, institutions react differently as much as we do as individuals. The way you were describing, right, the different generation and how and what are the paradigm that we are living or growing up with, right? So it's kind of, and I think that goes back to your points, Joanny, around the mindset, right? It's not a fixed mindset. We can change mindset, right? But it requires hard work. So it's not something you go to a training one day, 2 days, or even a couple of months, right? And then here we go, I have a new mindset. It requires practice and thinking about this. So in terms of what we're seeing, and I see Patrice raising his hand, let me give a short snapshot, and then and we can open up to the comments. So I think what the way I would describe it is pretty much what I said about what we are seeing with organization, that there is some kind of realization that so super important, that there is no one size fits all, and there is no one who has the silver bullet. So it is an ecosystem or a shared responsibility. And I talk a lot with employer representation, so unions at different levels, but also governments and employer associations. So, and at the end, everyone is fighting for saying, well, we are doing enough, right? So, and I think everyone needs to take a step forward and change their well, not just their point of view, but what took us here won't take us there, right? So
absolutely.
We say at the ADECO group, we say we need a new social contract. So it's about redefining the expectations or realizing the new expectations and the new rights or responsibilities that everyone, the employers, the employee, and the institutions or the public, and in broader terms, are having, right? So as we change the paradigm, we need and we move into more flexibility. So I think that this realization is being talked about. It's being talked about up to the ILO level, but it's very much top layer, right? Mm-hmm. What happens really on the ground is here also not yet. It hasn't transpired entirely. And one of the things that our clients say most to say, everyone wants flexibility, and we want to hire from everywhere, and we want to hire differently, and we want people to work more hybrid. And actually we are restricted by the regulations, right? So I think the answer here is not, oh, the government has to change, so we're going to fix it. I think it takes really every single partner in this equation need to rethink their role. But it's true that from a regulation standpoint, we already pre-COVID, we already had like partly regulations from the previous century, right? So it's changing slowly. So now we are definitely overruled for a lot of pieces. So that's what I would say about, you know, what are we seeing? There are, you know, more on the talking, but on the walking, we're still waiting for more results. Do we want to open it for?
Yes, let's open it up to Patrice, because I also had a comment on that, but I'm curious to give voice to the hand.
Patrice. Yeah, thanks for the conversation. It's really interesting. My question basically is more about the age challenge, because we know, and that bridge with the regulation, we know that now in every country the question of working longer is on the plate of more or less every government. But in the same time, we saw that majority of the people 50, 55 plus, they are the first one basically to be on the wagon when there is something like a restructuration, a transformation whatsoever. These people 50, 55, 60 plus, they have one thing in mind. They want to basically secure their family, their income, etc. So in terms of mindset, they are able to accept more or less everything in terms of flexibility. Tell me what I have to do. Tell me where I have to go to have a training, flexible in working hours, etc., etc. So their agility, their mindset for change is really high. However, even though there is this high response from the corporate culture, from the HR, from the management, majority of the time, these people, they get a refuse because, oh, this guy is getting too old, or this guy has too much experience, he will be bored in that job, it's not his level, etc., etc. And somehow, sometimes the answer is a bit biased, but what do you recommend to these folks, which is in this condition, who will be in that position in a few years, because we know that it will come, it will be a massive problem.
Yeah, it's there is a very easy answer, right? No, I'm just kidding. So this is a topic that is keeping us busy as well a lot, because this is a realized or something we are well aware of, and as we enable and empower those people, the more senior workers, and to transition, we see that what you are describing very much as well. I think as much here, it's there is a lot that goes down to the mindset. I think there are some arguments around, you know, how more expensive you get as an employee when you get older for pension reasons, etc. I mean, it varies also on these points across the countries and geographies depending on the systems. But that's certainly one area that obviously is outside of our proper control, other than you know, thinking about how can you as a person, when you get into these well, age group, it's not a category as such, but it's kind of as you grow older that you also think about your flexibility. But that brings me back to and you know, what you expect in terms of financial reward, whether, you know, that's a typical thing we look at with our candidates in that way, that we look at the overall package that an organization is ready to offer, not just the pure salary. There might be some other types of compensation that could be you know, providing rewards for the person. But I think the biggest piece here is around mindset, and you named it, right? You say typically they get refused, but they have the right mindset. They might not have it. So what we find is companies tend to think, or there is a social say that, right, all the people are not as digital. They don't, you know, get along as well with the new technologies as others. They are not as flexible, etc. And what we see is that it's not a matter of age, it's a matter of mindset. So I think this is something that we as individuals need to cultivate and think about what can we do to not just show and breathe the mindset, but also what can you do already now in your, even in your 30s, in your 40s, what can you do now to get prepared to continue to stay flexible and show that you are flexible, get along with the new technologies, etc., so that this mindset is transpiring. And if I speak to and I did actually, my team did a research when it was pre-pandemic, but we spoke with a lot of 50 plus candidates, so from the silver population, as Singapore would call them, which I love, because silver is like there is something shiny in here. But they said, many of them said, I was doing the right things, but suddenly I lost track of keeping my network externally, staying agile, because I was so much focused on my career internally. And so that's typically what happens along the mid-career, where you are getting more successful, or you're concentrating on capitalizing on the efforts that you've done in the past, and kind of concentrating on your position internally, and you might get a little longer tenure. And then you lose part of your flexibility, or the flexible mindset, in terms of staying agile on your feet, looking around what's happening and what are the skills that you need to develop. So, long story cut short, it's not a silver bullet. And yes, there is again here a disconnect between what companies tend to look for and what or they think they look for, right? Because there is this prejudgment, thinking that if you are in that age, you per se are not the right type of person. And at the same time, the other piece is we observe that the mid-size companies, smaller and mid-size companies, tend to invest more or capitalize more on the experience, and look for more of these type of competencies, right? People who have the experience, who know how the world works to some extent. So you get more chances within that segment at this stage of where we are today with the mindsets on the labor market.
Okay, thank you. I have some recommendations for my friends then.
That's great. And I would only add, perceptions die hard, absolutely. But what you say, Patrice, resonates really true in terms of the resilience, in terms of the willingness to work as hard as necessary to get things done. And that is something we're not seeing in the younger generations. And I have some very concrete examples of organizations that are struggling today because they can no longer rely on that same level of engagement that they can rely on more senior professionals, because there's a different, maybe even concept of work ethics. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a completely different conversation, but at some point an important one to have too. At least my generation as well, it was like, you work, you know what, it's your obligation to give the best that you can give. And so I think that's really important. At the same time, what Murielle, you're also saying is, I think that is the avenue to pursue, because one of the issues in this mid-career type of situation, 50s and above, I would call them the golden years, not the silver ones, but it is more about, there's a tendency to think the same as well, which is to say, I've been in this function for so long, this is what I know, I've been in this sector, this is what I know, and this is what I'm going to continue to pursue. Well, how about thinking a bit differently? How about looking into what are the type of portfolio of experiences that you have brought, and you can shape a different positioning within the market. And I definitely agree that startup companies, mid-sized companies, and if you're based in Switzerland, for example, there's a lot going on in the innovation space where the younger generations, I call them younger generations, I mean, and it has a lot to do with individual mindsets, so we are generalizing, but they do require some experience. They do require people who know what they're talking about, who have been there, and who can support in, for example, ramping up organizations, in ramping up functions, in building the capabilities that are necessary to make that organization successful. So I think finding a different strategy and learning how to look into your engine, what is that hardware that you bring to the table and that fuel that's going to be driving you, then I think you will find different opportunities popping up. That said, it is a challenge. I think nobody's denying the contrary.
And if I may, just one not last comment, but a comment on that as well is what we are starting to really advocate for, and not just at the institutional level, but really to anyone, is particularly in mid-career, is start seeing coaching not as a remedy to something that doesn't work, but more to get you prepared and equipped for the future. So particularly if you're getting to your mid-career, and mid-career might be that we're working until 80, right? So it's like, I'm thinking around like 40, around the 40s, like that's the classical way of putting the mid-career, right? But in terms of thinking about this as actively seeking for not a second opinion, but a second pair of eyes, and someone who challenges you. It can of course be done within your friends or even within the company. But I think thinking about career coaching not as, oh, now my path is stuck, so I need some help. It's more about, hey, what are other things out there? And I was doing that, Paula. You were saying before that I was looking. My daughter, today is the Future Day in Switzerland. So it's the day where kids go to the workplace with their parents, if they are lucky to have parents who have an interesting enough job so that they can get anything out of this, right? I would have loved to have her part of this conversation, but
absolutely.
she doesn't really quite get the English at that pace. But long story cut short, I think it's also about her now being 10, right, 5th grade, thinking about, what do I want to do? What does she want to do, right? The classical one is, I want to be a teacher. I want to be that, what I see, what I can feel and understand and feel that, oh, this is something good, right? But the more you get other ideas and exposed to other possibilities, the more you can relate to that as your aspirations. So get active. It doesn't mean you need to do a big business plan to think about founding a new company in your 50s. It just means about exploring the options and think about what you really want and where you want to spend time on.
Although, why not? I'm a firm believer, becoming an entrepreneur of your life. That's exactly what it means. It means look at your portfolio of offerings as if you were a CEO, and manage your finances as if you're a CFO, manage your brand as if you are a badass CMO. Like this, once we are able to embrace that type of mindset and get the support needed, absolutely, with a coach or with a support group, there are lots of support groups as well that can really help in the brainstorming. But once you get into that mindset, you say, hey, I have a truckload of things that I can offer, and if you can package that in such a way and see, well, who are the best buyers and who are the best partners that I can work with, making sure, of course, the finances are covered and kind of under control. But I would recommend that regardless of your age. Because hopefully we're going to be super productive in the course of our lifetime, even when we're 80, 90. We may be going to Mars, and hopefully we're still being productive in that stage. But it is to open a bit that concept of work is much more than just a job. Work is more than an employment. Work is more than that social contract. It is really, and Joanne, she left the chat, but and the conversation, but there are many cakes out there, and even if they're not, we can bake some, together. But anyway, I get really passionate about this, so you will excuse me if I go on a roll on this topic. But I do think it is ever so important to really start thinking differently. And we have 10 minutes as well left, and I want to make sure that we cover other questions or comments that the people may have to Murielle, c'est à la français. Excuse me.
No, it's wonderful.
Voilà. I'll give it 30 seconds or so, and then I'll pivot it back to you, Murielle, in terms of, what would be your recommendations, your thoughts, when it comes to this aspect of defining a game plan for yourself that is able to help you navigate through what is a very unpredictable employment world and a world of work. And I think, a couple of tips, tricks, things that you have seen work from where you stand, from where you sit. I think that would be an interesting way to close it. And of course, I want to hear what's wowing you, because that's also part of the wow. What is it that's giving you that energy and that optimism that we all need to bring that wow back to work?
Right. Yeah, so let me start, and please, if if you have questions, or I should be able to see how else, Paula, just interrupt
yes,
me.
I'm looking.
Maybe let me share a couple of things. So in terms of what we have seen, we have looked into what it takes our candidates, the people we support in transition. And also we spoke to our consultants across the globe to identify what make people more successful in their transition. And so I want to share a little bit of that, while this is more the job ready part, so the more short-term transition, right? And what we were talking about is also getting ready earlier, right? But let me share a couple of things here, because I think that obviously there are three big pieces, that three kind of competencies or skills that differentiates the ones who are successful versus those who takes longer. The one is confidence in own abilities. Number two is adaptive to change. And number three is perseverance. So it might not be the wow factor now, but actually these are not things like, communication or, the way, the strategy around your what you want in life, but really these very close to your heart, like the confidence, right? Being knowing, having a safe base and knowing what you can and what you can't, but also this piece around adaptive to change. So being agile on your feet and being open, right? The perseverance, I think it has also much more to do with a transition. Being short or longer term is a project. You can look at it as a project, and you need a strategy to do that. You need to have an idea of what you want, but you also need a strategy and work this through. Be resilient in that context. So I think it's quite an interesting, and these three were coming out very high, both from candidates' behavior and from consultants' assessment. So I think that's something to think about as we evolve and think about our transitions. Now, again, so this is more for the being job ready and being doing the transition as you needed to, because these people to a big extent are out of their jobs or know that they are losing it. The other piece is really, we spoke a little bit about mindset, and I think I heard Joanny say that it's difficult to change mindset, and yes, it is difficult, but I think, that's my biggest woe. I need to.
You have to jump out to another meeting.
No, I have my battery out of.
Okay.
Out
it
of
needs
this.
A bit of wow.
Exactly. So maybe you can fill in the gaps for a minute, and I'll be back. But this mindset of thinking about this ahead, and I love how you put it, Paula, in terms of being the architect and your own entrepreneur. But this is hard work, right? This scares a lot of people. So I think starting small and getting some help, a career coach or someone within your
Absolutely.
HR or outside. Don't be afraid of doing that, so that you can get going with getting the options.
Absolutely. Starting small, that's a way of doing it, but thinking big. I'm a firm believer. If you don't stretch our thinking, if you don't think, big and long term, no matter what your age is, then you're never even going to start small. So I think I've lost Murielle, but I hope that makes sense in terms of just doing what we can do and realizing there are some things that we can change within ourselves. And we're the only ones who can do that, and nobody can do that on our behalf. We may have structures in place, we may have programs in place to help. And that I think is really important. Why? Because it channels and it focuses and it helps create clarity amongst a lot of noise that's out there. But once you have the thinking mechanism in place and you kind of realize how the machine works, right? Then it's really up to us to make it happen. And regardless of what's happening around us. I mean, that's important. Of course, we said it before, it's an ecosystem. We need to have all parties that kind of dance to a similar tune. Doesn't need to be the same tune, but it does need to be a little bit of a similar tune. And I think we are going in that direction. But in the meantime, don't wait. Be daring, be audacious, be, as I said, like an entrepreneur would be, which would test out some ideas. The other day, I was talking to somebody who is within the gold bracket, and this person is an engineer. He has a technical background in the digital space and telecommunications, etc. So you would imagine up and coming industry, right? And there is a lot going on with the 5Gs, especially here in Switzerland and so on and so forth. And yet all doors have been closed for him most of the time because overqualified, too experienced, too expensive, notwithstanding all the cuts that this person was willing to take, even from a compensation and a salary perspective. And I was asking him, I said, well, explain to me a little bit about this whole technology, the 5Gs and blah, blah, blah. And he was spectacular in the way he was explaining it to me. And I said, have you ever considered reaching out to the technical universities? Have you ever considered reaching out to some of, as I was mentioning before, innovation hubs? Because you have a great ability in translating what to me are complicated concepts and translating them in a simple way, in an understandable way. And you know what? That triggered an inspiration for him to kind of think differently and explore different paths from the usual one that he was exploring, which is I need to apply to a job which matches as much as possible my abilities. And by the way, LinkedIn has a great ability of doing that to us, right? You are amongst the top 3% of the applicants. Your skills are amongst blah, blah, blah. That's a great algorithm, but it is an old algorithm. It is an old way of thinking. So anyway, I hope that's also helpful and complementing what you were saying, Murielle, as you were getting your energy back up and running, your fuel back up and running in your computer, and getting that self-worth and motivation and confidence in yourself. Actually, your computer getting the confidence.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yes, if you'd like to finish, I was basically complimenting what you were saying and giving some examples on how people can start thinking differently. Although it is small steps, I do believe you need to have a big vision nonetheless for yourself. First of all, because you owe it to yourself. As I like to say, if we're the biggest assets in companies, we have to believe it ourselves. Because if we don't, then why would anybody else believe it?
And obviously what I said earlier was, this confidence in own abilities is the number one. Is really not what I had expected. It's not that it's super counterintuitive, but I wouldn't put this as number one, right? So I think it comes back to what you were saying, right? Knowing who you are, but also what you want, I think is an important one. And yes, not everyone feels as comfortable as others, right? But I think starting now is actually a good time to think about it, and so that you will be also much better aware. Well, not just aware, but kind of relating to any opportunities that are arising. If you know that this is matching what you can and what you can't, but also what are your aspirations, what you want to develop as a vision. Totally agree.
Great. If there are no further questions, counting down 10, 9. I'll let you do the countdown. Thank you very much for the claps and for the thumbs up. I thoroughly enjoyed this session, by the way, Murielle. Thank you very much. I mean, I went into different parts as typically these conversations go, but I do think having your perspective also from a business perspective, what you are seeing from LHH point of view, I think that's also very important because it kind of keeps us grounded in terms of what's happening out there. And so your final thoughts, of what is it that's wowing you? What's putting that wow to work for you?
Right. Oh, okay. So, well, I mean, my what bringing me, these are two different things, right?
Well, true, but
not entirely true. It's not entirely true. I'm generally speaking more of a passionate person, so I get excited by a lot of things. But I think one thing. So what gets me excited to what I do is on the one hand to be able to exchange and advance the agenda around what is important for people, for us, in the future, and by gathering these perspectives, it's completing a picture that makes us more effective to build the future. So that I feel very fortunate to be combining that with a company that has a mission to make the future work for everyone, and making a difference, a person at a time. So that's kind of what really moves me. And I think the other piece that wows me is I will be part of the delegation at the ILO conference around the lifelong learning and career guidance that is happening now end of the month. It's the first time ever for me, but I think it shows that lifelong learning and career orientation, career guidance, career coaching, however we want to call it, but that piece that I mentioned that is so critical as an enabler is getting more recognition more and more as an enabler for the future, for, of course, for productivity, but for also better functioning labor markets. And at the end of the day, for us, for everyone, as a booster for one's employability and relevance and resilience on the job market. So I think that is wowing me to see that, the agenda is progressing slowly, baby step, but baby steps,
absolutely.
First steps.
Well, come back then. We want to know. We want to have a follow-up from the ILO. We're going to be like the little fly on the wall.
Exactly.
And get some pearls of wisdom, because so here we are at the end of this fantastic episode together with Murielle. I'm definitely gonna ask her how it went with the ILO, how those baby steps are becoming huge leaps, because that's ultimately what we are striving to do here. Leaps, not only leaps of faith, but leaps of concrete actions. Until the next time, do take care of yourselves, and by the way, remember to subscribe to the World of Work podcast. Take good care.